Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to episode 19 of Buha's Block. We have some breaking news. Lakers head coach Darvin Ham has been fired today. As we reported on The Athletic on Monday night, it was unlikely that Ham was going to be brought back as head coach next season. And as I reported Wednesday night on The Athletic NBA show, I was hearing that it was expected to happen by the end of the week, which it did. And this isn't necessarily a surprise with how the season ended and with the reporting that we did, looking at the Lakers losing in the first round, losing in 5 games, losing essentially as decisively to Denver as they did last postseason. The final margin of the series was 2 points better. They technically won a game, but it was a similar result where Denver won the series handedly, despite the Lakers actually leading for almost 70% of the series. And really that blown 20-point lead in the second half of game 2 was the final straw. We were told and we reported just the fact that the Lakers could not hold on to that lead. And looking at how the series played out, that was the difference between the Lakers potentially going to 6 games. That really was the series. It did not help matters that afterwards, Anthony Davis said there are stretches where we don't know what we're doing on either end of the floor. It also did not help matters that Darvin Ham chose to amplify that comment and get defensive and defend him and his coaching staff and continue the narrative around both the organization and the locker room, especially with the players, that he did not take accountability publicly. And in speaking to people with the Lakers, this is a tough situation because Darvin Ham was a beloved figure around the organization. He's a good guy. He's a good dude. I can attest to that. And I think the Lakers really wanted to do their due diligence over the last few days to make sure that they were making the right decision and not making a rash decision. So before we look ahead, I want to look back at where I think things went wrong and give some context to the situation. Context I've talked about on here, I've written about, but I think it's important to revisit it, put things in perspective, and look forward toward who the Lakers could be looking at in this upcoming coaching search. So I think things went wrong in the beginning of the season when Jared Vanderbilt got injured in the first preseason game, because all offseason, all training camp, the Lakers were championing their continuity. That was the buzzword. They were building off of their 2023 run, closing out the season 19-9, making the West, winning the play-in, making the Western Conference Finals, and all the success they had. And that success was built around LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Austin Reeves, D'Angelo Russell, Rui Hachimura, and Jared Vanderbilt. And of course, Dennis Schroeder, though he moved on to the Toronto Raptors, so the Lakers replaced him with Gabe Vincent. And the plan for the Lakers was to basically replace Dennis with Gabe and replace the Troy Brown, Malik Beasley minutes as like the 8th, 9th guy with Taurean Prince, replace Tristan Thompson, Wenyen Gabriel with Christian Wood and Jackson Hayes. And on paper, those tweaks and really those improvements when looking at Taurean Prince compared to Troy Brown and Malik Beasley, and then looking at Wood and Hayes compared to Thompson and Gabriel, like those were clear improvements at the time. And then Gabe Vincent versus Dennis was about a wash. Like Gabe was a starting guard on a Heat team that made the finals. So like there was a lot of excitement around the changes that the Lakers made. And entering the season, there was a training camp battle that was supposed to be between Rui Hachimura and Jared Vanderbilt for that starting small forward spot. And all summer, I had been hearing and reporting that Rui Hachimura was the favorite to land that people around the organization were excited for Rui to continue the postseason run that he had. He had that breakout party against Memphis, was not much of a factor against Golden State, but then also had a really impressive series against Denver where he defended Nikola Jokic and also was a weapon for the Lakers. So entering the season, the plan is Rui and Jared Vanderbilt. Then there starts to be a little bit of buzz for Taurean Prince to potentially earn that spot, because on paper, he is a 3-and-D wing. Coming into the season, he was shooting in the high 30s the last few years in terms of three-point percentage. He said his goal for the season was to shoot 40% from 3. So Taurean was coming in as the best shooter of the group, And then defensively had a little bit more versatility than Rui, obviously not on the level of Vando. But Torian was originally signed to be an 8th or 9th man on this team. And then early in camp, Rui's struggling. He's not buying into the things that the coaching staff is asking of him in terms of defense and rotations and rebounding and making the extra pass and all these little things. Then you have Vando get injured in the first preseason game, and that opens up this opportunity for Taurean Prince. And Taurean Prince ends up starting the first 50 games of the season, and he misses a few games, so it ends up being, I want to say, he plays 47 of the first 50, and then he doesn't start for a few games, and then he starts around the All-Star break, and then that's it. It ends up starting 49 games. But the Lakers go 24-25 in the 49 games that he starts. And during that process, they're shuffling guys in and out of the starting lineup. They bench Austin Reeves 9 games into the season. They bench D'Angelo Russell in late December. They try out this all-wing lineup that goes 2 and 3, first with Cam Reddish in there, then with Rui Hachimura in there. And that group does not have any playmaking really outside of LeBron and then AD in the post. And as a DHO guy, does not have much shooting outside of LeBron and Taurean Prince. And at the time, Rui Hachimura wasn't shooting the ball as well and was more of a low volume shooter. It started to uptick over the course of the rest of the season. But that lineup, it's the first time I've ever openly ripped a starting lineup in a column. I just could not believe that starting lineup adjustment. In speaking to people around the Lakers, they could not believe that starting lineup adjustment. And the initial one, which was AD, LeBron, Vando, Cam Reddish, and Taurean Prince, left D'Angelo Russell, Austin Reeves, and Rui Hachimura all coming off the bench. And those were the Lakers' 3rd, 4th, and 5th highest paid players. In most people's opinion, around the team, around the NBA, those are the Lakers' 3rd, 4th, and 5th best players. I think there's some quibbling in terms of D'Lo versus Austin. I think there's some quibbling maybe in terms of Rui versus Vando for like that 5-6 spot. But nowhere in there was any mention of Taurean Prince or Cam Reddish. And those guys, like Cam Reddish was a fringe rotation guy entering the season, though obviously he carved out a role and eventually became a starter. Taurean Prince, again, the 8th or 9th man who ends up starting and playing. If you go back and look at some of the box scores from early in the season, Taurean Prince, there are several games where Taurean Prince plays 35 minutes, Rui Hachimura plays 16 minutes, 18 minutes. And it wasn't just because Darvin would sometimes push back about the starting lineup and say that it's not important who starts, it's about who closes, it's about the middle of the game. Like everyone just fixates on the starting lineup. But that just wasn't true when you had Taurean Prince playing 30 to 50% more minutes than Rui Hachimura for the first 3 months of the season. And it never made sense. And Taurean unfortunately became the avatar for Darvin and some of his coaching decisions and the rotations and the lineups. And it wasn't Taurean's fault. I think for making $4.5 million, Taurean was solid and he lived up to that expectation for the most part, if not exceeded it during certain stretches of the season. But he was not built to be a 30-plus minute a night guy. And I think the Lakers record reflected that, where again, 24-25 with Taurean Prince as the starter and 23-10 with him coming off the bench or not playing, period. And that extended to minutes where they were 28-8 in the 36 games Taurean Prince played fewer than 25 minutes or missed. He missed several games throughout the course of the season. So like the lineup data was there. If you look at, there was a significant swing where the starting lineup with Rui was about plus 6.3 points per 100 possessions. With Taurean Prince, they were minus 1 point per 100 possessions. So that's a 7-point swing. And that is a significant swing. That is the difference between outscoring your opponent versus being outscored by your opponent. And if you remember, early in the season, in October, November, and December, the Lakers had that stretch there where they would get blitzed in first quarters and they'd be trailing by double digits. There were several games they were down by 20 plus in the first quarter. And one of the common denominators was Taurean Prince missing open threes or turning the ball over or getting out rebounded or him getting cooked by a primary wing scorer or a primary backcourt scorer. And he was just being overtasked with responsibilities that he was not capable of handling. And the lineup data was clear all season, where when the Lakers played big with some combination of LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Jackson Hayes, Christian Wood, Rui Hachimura, or Jared Vanderbilt, those 6 guys in the front court, those lineups were all very positive. Whenever you swapped in one of Cam Reddish or Taurean Prince or even Austin Reeves, you saw a significant decline in terms of playing smaller lineups and playing 3-guard lineups. Now, there were some exceptions. The 3-guard lineups with Spencer Dinwiddie, D'Angelo Russell, and Austin Reeves were actually positive during the course of the season. And 3-guard lineups with Max Christie at small forward were positive during the season. And that's also a sidebar here, where Max Christie, who, if you look at the way that Denver developed Christian Brown and Peyton Watson, Max Christie, there's no reason why he can't make a similar impact compared to those guys. And those guys largely were not scoring, but looking at how Denver said, we're going to rely on our young talent that we're developing. And like, yes, they're going to be inconsistent. It's not going to be the best bench group in the league, but we're going to groom these guys to play important minutes. The Lakers had that opportunity and they wasted it often by playing Cam Reddish and Taurean Prince. At a minimum, Max Christie should have been getting the minutes over Cam Reddish. I think like it was pretty clear throughout the middle of the season that Max Christie was a better player than Cam Reddish. He's a better 3-point shooter, a better rebounder. And honestly, like other than like Cam's more of a highlight reel defensively in terms of his steals and his deflections, and like he's got the body and the athleticism. But Max was a much sturdier, more fundamental, and in my opinion, and again, in several other people's opinions, a more impactful defender than Cam Reddish. So I think the biggest complaint from the regular season was just not starting the Lakers' best players and not playing the Lakers' best players in general, even if they weren't going to start. Jared Vanderbilt played 32 minutes alongside LeBron, AD, Austin, and D'Lo, and 19 of those came in that double overtime game against Golden State. About 60% of them came just in that game. And the Lakers had planned on starting Jared Vanderbilt finally in that Boston game. Then LeBron and AD get ruled out, and then Jared Vanderbilt gets injured at the end of the first half, and then that dream dies and he gets cleared for game 5, but ultimately doesn't play. Then the Lakers finally turn to Rui Hachimura and realize Taurean Prince cannot be the starter. He needs to not only come off the bench, but have his minutes reduced. And you see the run the Lakers go on. 18-6 in the regular season with Rui as the starter, with the other 4, 19-6 if you want to include the play-in tournament. Obviously, they go 1-4 in the playoffs, but that group did not have continuity. As I've written numerous times, they only appeared in 6 of the potential 26 games that they could have played in before Rui became the starter on February 3rd. And this is before mentioning some of the timeout stuff, some of the challenge stuff. Darvin Ham finished game 2 with 2 timeouts remaining. It was an issue all season where the Lakers would be in some of these close games. He'd be saving it for the game, and then he would finish the game with a timeout or 2. Challenging plays too early or not challenging them at all was an issue at times. I think the biggest issue overall, though, was just him not knowing who the Lakers' best players were outside of LeBron and AD, or knowing and refusing to deploy them that way. And really, it all comes back to his affinity for Taurean Prince, who he coached previously in Atlanta, and that was the peak of Taurean's career in terms of starting and playing 30-ish minutes. And Taurean finished playing 27 minutes per game this season, but that was at 30 plus for a majority of the year until he became a bench player. He was 3rd on the team in minutes for a majority of the year before he eventually moved to the bench. So like, regardless of if you want to nitpick Rui's game or Vando's game and say that Vando missed 53 games, Rui missed 14 games. Those guys were in and out of the lineup at various points. If you want to say Taurean's healthy, he's available, he's reliable, even if that reliability is a pretty low floor and a relatively low ceiling, sure, you can make that argument. You can say he should have been starting or should have been playing X amount of minutes, but like the fact that he was playing more minutes than D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves, and the fact that the Lakers benched those 2 guys, their 3rd and 4th best player. I've been on record saying I think Austin's their 3rd best player. Some people disagree and think D'Lo's their 3rd best player. Regardless of who you think the Lakers' 3rd best player was this season, it was not Taurean Prince, and it was never Taurean Prince. And he should have never been 3rd on the team in minutes. He should not have had as big of a role as he did. And really, that was a factor for a lot of people of just, why did we waste 50 games starting a bench player, putting him in a role he should have never been in, playing him 30 plus minutes, and having those lineups largely be negative, having him finish with the worst plus minus on the season. And I think there are a lot of national people who will chime in and sort of overlook it or dismiss it and say, well, how much of a difference did it really make Taurean Prince over Rui Hachimura? But like, if you are saying that, you do not know the full context of the Lakers season. You're either not paying attention on a nightly basis or you just don't really get it. But the fact of the matter was, like, this was something that was an issue basically from like late November, early December. That's another thing that I've said and that other people have acknowledged as well, is like, it's one thing if you start Taurean, you want to give him a shot, you give him a month, you give him a month and a half. But by game 20, game 25, it was pretty clear the Lakers needed to go in a different direction. And instead, it was, again, benching Austin early and then eventually benching D'Lo once they hit that rough patch. And it never at any point was, let's bench the guy that was not part of last year's run, the guy who's making a third of the money of Austin, a quarter of the money of D'Lo, a quarter of the money of Rui, and we'll be making less than half of the money of Vando starting next season once Vando's extension kicks in. And it's not always about money, right? It's about production, but the production was not there in comparison to those guys. Again, at no point in the season was Taurean Prince better than Austin Reeves or D'Angelo Russell, even with their struggles, because those guys out there, they're giving you a level of playmaking, of ball handling, of offensive gravity. And yes, Austin had a rough start to the season coming off of Team USA. Yes, D'Lo had a rough December and went through that really tough shooting stretch. And I don't know who Darvin Ham was alluding to when he told ESPN's Dave McMenamin that a starter shit the bed for 10 straight games. I mean, looking at it, I guess it was D'Lo. Like, people have been using the D'Lo graphic. I don't know. Like, Austin did not shit the bed for his first 8 games. So did have a couple of rough performances. Again, I'm not saying he played great, but if you look at it, he did have some good games in there. So I don't think it was Austin, and that was an 8-game sample, unless that's what Darvin is alluding to. Maybe it was D'Lo in December. He had some rough games again before he got benched. But I think that is a pretty biased perspective in terms of overlooking Taurean Prince's shooting struggles. Like, he went through several stretches during the season where he could not shoot and his minutes did not fluctuate, regardless of if he was a starter or a bench player. And Cam Reddish, who after a few weeks of hot shooting became a sub, at times 30% three-point shooter, and would have turnovers and really lost a step or two defensively over the second half of the season. And part of that was injuries, and he was in and out of the lineup with that, but he still continued to get minutes over certain guys and still continued to get minutes and opportunities over Max Christie. So I think it really comes down to, when looking at the totality of where things went wrong, it was the post-IST stretch. It was the starting Taurean Prince for over half the season and playing him way more than better players, including not only Vando and Rui, but Austin and D'Lo. Cam Reddish getting afforded every chance to succeed, and that at times costing the team, especially in terms of lineup data. He was worse than Taurean in a lot of the lineup data. And then some of the in-game management with timeouts and challenges. And to be clear, I don't put 100% of the blame on Darvin Ham for this season. I don't think anybody does. If they are, then you are being foolish. Like, I think there is plenty of blame to go around, partly with the front office for the construction of this team. As I feared before the season, while Jackson Hayes and Christian Wood are better than Wenyen Gabriel, who's currently not in the NBA, and Tristan Thompson, who is barely hanging on in the NBA, the bar was pretty low. And those two guys were ultimately not playoff caliber big men, especially in a matchup with Denver, where if you're going to be playing your bigs, it should theoretically be in a Denver matchup, be it backing up Anthony Davis or playing 2 big lineups. And instead, the Lakers sometimes, like Jackson played a little bit, but then they'd go with Rui or LeBron at center. So, I mean, I think that is an indictment on the roster build. I also think the lack of two-way players, and specifically on the perimeter. And it's unfair to hold it against Gabe Vincent, but he never found his offensive groove. Spencer Dinwiddie was up and down offensively and largely down as the season progressed. Taurean Prince shot the ball well, but regressed as a defender. Jared Vanderbilt started to play better offensively, but he got injured and still is largely an offensive minus. Austin Reeves really stepped it up defensively, but that kind of took away from some of his offense. D'Lo was a defensive minus for most of the season. Rui had some improvement defensively, and I thought had some good individual matchups, but ultimately chasing a guy like MPJ exposed some of his defensive limitations. And you had LeBron, year 21, age 39, and he just couldn't give it on a nightly basis. Couldn't give it most of the time defensively, but when he ramped it up, you saw that ceiling, and you saw the chase down blocks and him rotating as like the low man. And like there were some good moments defensively, but it wasn't consistent enough, which it was tough to ask of him in year 21. And then Anthony Davis, of course, is probably second team All-NBA, should have been more in the defensive player of the year conversation. But from a roster construction perspective, there's a lot to look at and poke holes in with this roster for sure. I don't want to overlook that. With the players, D'Lo really struggled in the Denver series. Rui really struggled in the Denver series. Gabe and Spencer gave the Lakers basically nothing offensively. LeBron struggled at times defensively. Austin had a couple of rough offensive games. AD started to tire out in second halves and fourth quarters. There was also injuries that played a big role. Gabe Vincent missed 71 games. Jared Vanderbilt missed 53 games. Christian Wood missed the final 26 games and the playoffs. Vando didn't come back. Cam Reddish missed a good chunk. I think he missed around 30 games. Rui Hachimura missed 14 games. So there were some factors that were out of the Lakers' control, and then some factors with the roster build and player performance that ultimately led to the Lakers falling short against Denver and falling short of their goal of winning a championship. But I do think that if we're doing a blame pie, Darvin Ham gets the largest slice just for the basics of mishandling his best players, not starting them enough, not playing them enough. Clearly, at some point, those guys started to tune him out. There was a disconnect, as we reported at The Athletic in early January. That got better, but it never went away. And I think you saw that with some of the comments D'Angelo Russell made during the Denver series, even LeBron, Anthony Davis. Like, guys were taking subtle and not so subtle shots at Darvin Ham really throughout the second half of the season. But especially during the Denver series, there were little barbs at the game planning and the preparation, and the Lakers knowing what they were doing, obviously with AD's quote standing out the most. Which brings us to what is ahead. What does the future hold for the Los Angeles Lakers and their coaching search? I've already started to hear over a half dozen names. The most common names that I've heard are Mike Budenholzer, who is considered the top coach on the market right now, though that could change depending on what happens with Ty Lue and the Clippers. Speaking of Ty Lue and the Clippers, it is no secret that LeBron loves Ty Lue. He is his favorite coach of all time. He continues to speak about Ty Lue with reverence. I remember the comment during the season when the Lakers beat the Clippers in early January, snapping that 4-game losing streak that they were on. And he got asked by a reporter, what do you think of the new James Harden Clippers? And LeBron corrected the reporter and said that, no, it's the Ty Lue Clippers. And it took Ty 5 games to figure this shit out. And ever since then, they've been rolling. And I took that as a subtle shot at Darvin, because at the time, the Lakers had not figured things out. They had just lost 4 games in a row before beating the Clippers, and they were amid the worst stretch of their season. And earlier in the press conference, he was asked about what Darvin Ham has done to help the Lakers through the ups and downs of the season. And LeBron, I'm paraphrasing here, but he essentially said Darvin Ham just shows up, and he shows up and he's here. Like, it was a very non-supportive comment about Darvin Ham and his coaching ability. I think you saw that from players throughout the season. But if Ty Lue is let go by the Clippers, I've been told that the Lakers will have interest in Ty Lue. They courted him in 2019. It did not go well. They ended up settling on Frank Vogel, who was their third choice behind Ty Lue and Monty Williams. It ended up working out. They won a championship in their first season with Vogel, but then he got fired a couple years later. Ty Lue, the next season, ended up taking the Clippers job after Doc Rivers was fired, and Clippers have gone on to the Western Conference Finals once, and we'll see what ultimately happens with them against Dallas. It is looking like, because Kawhi Leonard is out, they're probably going to lose that series, at which point potentially Ty Lue, with a year left on his deal, maybe they need a new voice, a new leader there, and Ty Lue becomes available, at which point I think he becomes the top candidate for the Lakers. There's also LeBron James's podcast partner, JJ Redick, who has become the hot coaching name around the league right now. He's gotten a lot of buzz with the Charlotte Hornets job. He's been one of the front runners for that. He's already interviewed for that a couple of times. And JJ, to me, I see some parallels with Steve Kerr, albeit a younger version of Steve Kerr. From a temperament perspective, they are not necessarily that similar. I think JJ runs a little hotter than Steve does. Steve is a bit more calm and laid back, although I think JJ can show that side of him during his podcast. But in terms of being a media presence who is beloved and who has shown how smart they are by getting in front of a microphone and giving their takes, that's where I see some of the parallels where like Steve Kerr had a very successful broadcasting career before landing the Warriors job and was very good at communicating. And I think that's been one of Steve's clear strengths is he's very good with the media. He knows how to communicate. He famously had that binder of how he wanted to be a coach and, had that at his meetings with the Knicks and the Warriors. And I think he was a very smart basketball mind who had modern perspectives on the game, but he also knew how to communicate it well. And sometimes that's half the battle. And I look at JJ Redick and his podcast, both with LeBron and individually, and his work on First Take. And sometimes he rubs people the wrong way, but you can't deny that he's incredibly smart and sharp. And it's looking like he has the makings of being a really good head coach if that's the path that he so chooses to go down, which it seems like he would. And then it brings up the dynamic of him and LeBron. And for LeBron to do a podcast with him, you'd have to think LeBron co-signs his basketball sensibilities and believes in him as a basketball mind. And you could hear from the conversations, they see eye to eye on most things. I think JJ is a bit more of an analytical mind and supports analytics and some of the numbers and stuff. LeBron does not seem to share that viewpoint, but for the most part, in terms of how they see the game, I think they're very aligned. And it would be interesting to see co-hosts become player coach. And JJ is not much older than LeBron. He's going to turn 40 in June. LeBron will turn 40 in December. So there's about a 6-month age gap there. So that would be a potentially fascinating hire, a first-year head coach who does not have even assistant coaching experience at the NBA level. He's been coaching his son's travel team, but again, played 15 years in the NBA, has transitioned to media, is clearly one of the smartest people covering the game in the media. And I think that bodes well for his communication skills at the next level. And then the fourth name that I've heard is Kenny Atkinson, the longtime assistant coach. He's currently with the Golden State Warriors, also coached the Brooklyn Nets for 4 years. He is regarded as one of the top assistant coaches in the league. He's gotten consideration for head coaching opportunities and interviewed over the last few years. So among those candidates, I look at Lue and Redick as the two that intrigue me the most. Lue for his pedigree with LeBron, and I think immediately you get that LeBron buy-in. Lue's teams have always been elite offensively. He's had top 5 offenses in 5 of his 7 seasons. The 2 seasons he has not had them, Kawhi Leonard has been largely injured in those seasons, and the Clippers have been a bit depleted from a roster perspective without Kawhi. And then you look at JJ Redick and again, the potential LeBron buy-in, but also I think just seeing how a 39 soon to be 40-year-old handles the pressure cooker of coaching the Lakers. And it seems like JJ's been preparing for this opportunity for a while. He's been talking to coaches and he's been very open about his desire to coach at the next level. So among the names I've heard, those two intrigue me the most. The one thing I find with Bud that's a little bit of a complicating factor is he's Darvin Ham's mentor. And if you had issues with Darvin Ham, you probably will have some issues with Mike Budenholzer because he's like one of the biggest criticisms of him. And he's been widely regarded as one of the best coaches in the league for the most part, but he's incredibly stubborn with adjustments and playing a certain style. And even if that style is not working within a series, he has been largely reluctant to make those adjustments. And there have been times like along the 2021 title run where he did make some key adjustments, but for the most part, that has been one of his shortcomings and ultimately one of the reasons why the Milwaukee Bucks moved on from him. So that would be my one concern with Bud, would just be, are you bringing in a better version of Darvin, which yes, is a better coach, but might ultimately have some of the same pitfalls and shortcomings. With Atkinson, it is worth noting that he did not last the first year of the Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving superstar pairing. He was fired before the end of the season. Kevin Durant did not play in that season, but when it comes to managing stars, that could be a potential concern. Though he did get plenty of experience with that, coaching both the Clippers. He coached the Clippers in 2020, 2021 with Ty Lue in Ty's first year, and then also with the Golden State Warriors the last 3 years. So Kenny Atkinson is an interesting name. I'd probably put him 4th. My personal rankings would probably be Lue 1, JJ Redick 2, Mike Budenholzer 3, and Kenny Atkinson 4. I know JJ Redick at number 2 might be controversial for some people, especially in comparison to a decorated coach like Bud. Again, I just see some overlap with Bud and Darvin, and I don't love the concept of replacing the protege with the mentor when they have similar strengths and weaknesses. And of course, Ty Lue, if he's available, I think he's the best coach available, probably the best coach realistically available, and would make a lot of sense for the Lakers. We'll just have to go down the hallway and not have to make the move to Inglewood. So those have been the 4 names I have heard from multiple sources in recent days. There have been some other names that I'm not yet comfortable sharing yet, but I will in the coming days as I continue to report those out. But the Lakers are going to canvass the league. They're going to talk to experienced coaches. They're going to talk to young coaches. They're going to talk to assistant coaches. They're going to talk to guys clearly who aren't even coaches right now. They're really going to canvass the market and make sure they're doing their due diligence in finding the next head coach. And I think anytime you fire a coach and are looking for his replacement, there's a natural inclination to look for qualities that coach did not have. So I think they're going to be looking for someone who can command some of these strong personalities in the locker room, which to me would imply a strong buy-in from LeBron James, which is where I look at Ty Lue and JJ Redick, but also someone who is going to be a shrewd in-game manager with timeouts and challenges and playing the right players and starting the right players and just making sure the rotation makes sense. So I think they're going to be looking for some combination of that. And of course, offensive and defensive principles and some of the nuts and bolts will factor in. I think, price and contract length and like all that stuff. There's a lot that will go into this search, a lot of different factors on both sides in terms of what the Lakers are looking for and what some of these top coaching candidates will be looking for. But if the Lakers are willing to pay top dollar, which I've heard they are for the right coach, then that should make this process relatively easy. And to me, this is the top head coaching vacancy on the market right now. If you look at this versus Charlotte, I would rather be the coach for the Lakers. We'll see what happens with the Suns. We'll see what happens with the Clippers. But I think this is going to be the top head coaching vacancy on the market for the foreseeable future. And the Lakers will have their pick of all the top coaches. And again, we'll see what happens with Ty Lue. We'll see who they ultimately end up interviewing, which coaches advance. But those are the 4 names that I've heard. Again, Mike Budenholzer, Ty Lue, JJ Redick, and Kenny Atkinson. For those listening on YouTube, which one of those 4 do you want as the next Lakers head coach? If you want to rank them 1 through 4, drop a comment and let me know. That'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening. For those on YouTube, please be sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, drop a comment and a like. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back on Monday with episode 20 of the podcast. I will talk to you then.